I think it is without question that maps are what drew me into RPGs. The map from The Hobbit fired up my imagination, combined with the world in Tolkien's writings. That's what led me to want to find a way to inhabit such worlds and explore the places that I see on these maps. I've talked about The Hobbit a lot. I know it's a common tale amongst gamers, the map from The Hobbit and its inspirational nature. And then there's many other fantasy books. I've talked about the work of Paul Ruiz, aka Jeff Wingate. You might be familiar with his style through things like Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the first time round, the original, the classic UK TSR modules. Or you might have seen a similar style in the work of Monkey Blood Designs. Glyn Seal also cites Jeff Wingate as a sort of inspiration for his style of work. But that's not what I want to talk about today in this day 2 of RPG a Day month, maps. Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. Firetop Mountain was the first location in what was to become Alancia. It was followed by the Forest of Yore, the Vale of Willow and Cragun Rock from the Citadel of Chaos, and Darkwood Forest, Stonebridge and Yastromo's Tower in the Forest of Doom. The existence of Alancia itself was formally announced in April 1984 when the first edition of Warlock magazine was published. Now a collector's item, Warlock 1 featured the first map of Alancia ever released. Since then, the map has been expanded. Now there are not 1 but 3 continents in the fighting fantasy world of Titan. Ian, and to a lesser extent Steve, has continued to develop Alancia. All of Ian's books except 1 have taken place in the northwestern corner of this continent. The Old World comprises Kakabad, the land of Steve's sorcery, its surrounding kingdoms, and Galanteria from the Tarse of Tantalon. The third continent, Kul, is largely unexplored, with much work left to be done to chart its unknown reaches. But since that day in 1981, the world of Titan has been alive for both of us, a retreat from everyday life into another world, a world in which we have effectively been games masters in a huge global fantasy role-playing game. We've enjoyed developing the legends, lore, rumours and plots of the adventures, and we have chuckled at the tricks and traps we have set for our readers. There is good and there is evil, there is lore and there is chaos, but like the trickster gods, we have striven to ensure a balance in the world. I don't know how I found this book, Titan, the fighting fantasy world, but all I know is I loved it and I love it to this day. I read a little bit of the foreword there for you to set the scene, but I'd now like to read a little bit from the introduction talking about what's in the book itself. Welcome, brave adventurer. Welcome to our humble treatise on the wide and dangerous world of Titan. Within its covers you will find much that will prove helpful to you as you cleave your way across wild lands in search of fame and glory and treasure. With the help of all the information crammed into this essential work of reference, you will finally be equipped to fulfill your destiny as a hero, fighting for the forces of good. You will find geography, masterful charts and drawings of all the settled and not so settled lands of Titan. You will find maps of the old world, home of civilization and of learning, of Alancia, savage land of sorcerers and barbarians, and of Kul, which we will call the Dark Continent, the wasted birthplace of chaos. We will show you plans of elven villages and dwarf citadels, of rank human cities and rat-infested orcish caverns. There is even a portrayal of a citadel of the terrible snake people of the southern deserts. We have stopped at naught to bring this awesome information to you. And there you go. For me, it doesn't disappoint. It delivers on what it says it's going to do. That's just the start of it. It does then go on to talk about the history, where the world is today in terms of the fiction, all sorts of stuff. And then you're straight into a map showing the main continents in relation to the oceans. So as it explains, there's Atlantia, the old world, and Karl. And you've also got various islands dotted around. I think I'm biased, but I think it's a great setting. Most of my attention is a couple of pages on from there, and this was the map of Atlantia. If you are familiar with fighting fantasy, this is where you would see most of the places, most of the recognisable places, I should say. Particularly notable is Port Blacksand. Later on in the book you get a nice map of Port Blacksand itself. Rich pickings for the GM. Each of the locations on the map gets a little bit of a blurb. And back in the day, I remember agonising over the scale, trying to work out what the scale of the map was, because it doesn't come with one. And I was dutifully trying to work out my overland travel rates, and the only references I could find related to leagues. And I found a reference that said something or other like Port Blacksand to Stonebridge or something like that was so and so many leagues. I found a few of these kind of references, so off I went and tried to find out how far a league was, plotted it on the map. I seem to recall it was none too consistent, but I figured out, and I've got a little pencil note written in the book suggesting that 1 centimetre equals 144 miles. So there was some kind of method. How accurate that ended up being, I don't know, but as a youngster it seemed very important to me to get that right, because after all I was working from Mensa expert rules, and wilderness travel was a big part of that. We'd come out of the dungeons and we was exploring the wilderness, and you got to get all these things right. The first settlement that you come to is Fangfane, the dwarven capital. It's the typical dwarven city in a mountain. It's an isometric black and white line drawing. I say isometric, it's loosely isometric, showing a cross section of the mountain with an overland settlement on the outside and a road leading up to your typical huge double doors in the side of the mountain. It's got some spot art with some close-ups, and then a picture of King Namarkil up on the right hand side. This was at the time basically how I imagined the Lonely Mountain when you hear the description of Smaug on his treasure and the dwarfs taking back their old ancestral home. The next proper map in the book is Stittlewode. It's an elven village. Basically, if you picture something like the Ewok village in Return of the Jedi, this is a large sprawling treehouse, aerial walkways and homes built in the trees. Whilst I like the idea of it is not an especially inspiring map. It's fine, but not a standout one for me. I would say, en route to the next settlement, one that I spent a lot of time looking at, there is another drawing, and I believe this looks to me to be a Russ Nicholson, and it is a cross section of Nostromo's tower. It's one of these drawings, a bit like a kind of a Where's Wally illustration, where you've got loads of detail and you just end up peering at it, picking little things out. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and a half story tower, 2 basement stories, and then 8 above ground. From the Forest of Doom, Nostromo was one of the first, I guess, NPCs that I met up with as a young adventurer in the world of fighting fantasy. And this was an important point in the story where you had to choose what potions, I believe they were potions, that you wanted to pick up off of Nostromo before you went into the forest. Orcs, the warriors of evil. After the lords and masters, we come to the servants and slaves of evil. There are many inhuman races aligned with chaos. We shall attempt to cover the main ones here, starting with the most numerous, the rank and file of the armies of chaos, orcs. You will encounter orcs wherever you travel, from the frozen waste beyond the Icefinger Mountains to the idyllic desert islands of the southern seas. Wherever you go on Titan, there is one thing of which you can be certain: orcs will have been there before you, poking their snouts everywhere. They are tremendously curious beings, for all their lack of intelligence, and seem to enjoy exploring and discovering new things, though they never seem to take enjoyment in anything once they have control of it. It is this fact which keeps their armies marching ever onwards and their miners digging ever deeper. This brings me on to the last map that I want to talk about. I spent quite a lot of time looking at this one because it is Bone Rat Caves. It's an orc settlement, and I've always had a bit of a soft spot for orcs and goblins. Collected a lot of their minis over the years, and I always made my main armies were always greenskins. This drawing is kind of once again a sort of a isometric type of drawing, showing the sprawling network of an orc cavern system. Each of the chambers is annotated with an idea of what's in there. Say, for example, the second guard room, you've got 18 guards, bunks, tables and rubbish. There's perhaps a dozen labels like that on this drawing. It's pretty much a dungeon ready to go. Minimal detail, super easy to run. You could supplement it with a few notes, and it was probably the first time I encountered what I later discovered to be called the one-page dungeon, which is a much more recent discovery for me. But looking back at this now, I can see it's like most things. It's the one-page dungeon is not really a new concept. What is this? 1981, and it's perfect. And I'm trying to remember if I actually ran it as such. Maybe I didn't, but I tell you what, I think I'm going to make a print of this and stick it in my DM's book. It will be immortalised in my my records then. Also, I quite like the drawing of a procession of orcs, showing their kind of a cross section through their order of battle. You've got scouts at the front, followed up by a banner bearer, then some troops, then another banner bearer, then some more troops, then heralds, then the chief and the rear guard. And it's quite an amusing kind of cartoon style drawing. I would have studied that at the time as well. And that's about it for now. I think over the course of this month I'll revisit this book, go into a bit more detail. But that is some of the my favourite content in terms of maps. There's a couple more in there that I'll talk about another time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this somewhat impromptu episode. I'll play you out with a couple of messages from day one, kindly left by Karl Rodriguez, and you will hear he is quite the Dungeon Magazine fan and aficionado. Sounds like he's got quite a collection that I'm almost envious of if I had space. Take it away, Karl, and tune in tomorrow for the next thrilling instalment of RPG a Day.
See, with these little snippets, you're going to get a lot of call-ins because they're very easy to digest. And I'll probably send you 2 messages for this mini offering. So DCC, awesome. We have another player for DCC, Jason Connerly. When are we going to play? I know you're very busy, but there's like all this like negative DCC shade, man, or I guess shade is by implication negative. But I like the system, I like the game, I like the randomness. But hey, I like Savage Worlds 2 with exploding dice and drawing cards for initiative. So call me weird, I like weird things. And DCC is enough of the wacky and weird, and like you say, the maps and the art is just very unique and very thematic and consistent with what DCC and Goodman are trying to put out there. So kudos, more DCC love. Talking about Dungeon Magazine brings back loads of nostalgia for me. I have 3 boxes worth of old dungeons, and I've looked through them, and some are more beat up than others. The ones I bought more recently to fill in the collection are in better shape, oddly, but I used the crap out of them. There are some, especially in AD&D First Edition, and then surprisingly, not so much for Second, but instead for 3.5 or 3.5, there are some that are very cool and memorable. And I know off the top of my head, the most memorable adventure was in 3.5, and this was Tears for Twilight Hollow, because it was such a focal point and a turning point in our D&D 3 campaign. There's some earlier ones that I cannot think of right now, but the one that comes to mind and actually I've never played, is Empire of the Ghouls, which is in an older AD&D dungeon, and it was very reminiscent of the D1 and 2 Descent into the Depths and Vault of the Shrine of the Kuatoa, and of course Vault of the Drow in D3, and Night Below campaign. Actually, it was a really neat 2-parter, I think, that was in the older dungeon magazines, and was Wolfgang Bauer's introduction of the intelligent ghouls, a la Call of Cthulhu ghouls that had an empire, and he's brought that into Midgard now, which is a pretty neat concept, I think. So the ones that I played in the old First Edition, it's been so long, and they were always incorporated into our main campaign, so oh well. So I think, when TSR had it, and then I guess Wizards got hold of it. I think Paizo had it for there towards the end until Wizards took it back with the beginning of 4th edition. But Paizo, even towards the end, had some great adventure paths. The Shackled City, the Savage Tide, the Age of Worms, which were all really cool serial type of products. They had stuff in there for Eberron. Way back in 2nd edition, they had little adventures for Oriental Adventures and for Al-Qadim. So it was pretty cool, like what they gave, and it was a supplement to all the, because this came out bi-monthly, and we'd have to wait years for new actual official products. So the dungeons were a great supplement to continue your campaign when you didn't have a lot of prep time.
And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to Old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.